Hello, my friends. It's April 22nd, which is Vladimir Lenin's birthday. He was truly one of the horrific killers of the 21st century, not as prolific as his eventual successor, Joseph Stalin, or his emulator, Mao Zedong, but he made the template. He laid out the brutal and bloody path, and it is no coincidence that today is also Earth Day, the day that the war against private industry and private property is rephrased as environmentalism. It's like a watermelon, green on the outside, but red on the inside. On this Earth Day, for the umpteenth year in a row, North Korea takes the prize for lowest carbon footprint. They're shivering in the dark, as they are every day, frankly. Which brings me to the topic of Hong Kong, one of my favorite cities in the world, not only for the experience of being there, the energy, the excitement, the hustle bustle, the cosmopolitan feeling of a city with hundreds of thousands of the best and brightest expats from around the world working there, including an estimated 300,000 Canadians, if you can believe it. It's a place with a fascinating history and culture of China, but also of the UK, with British civic virtues and the rule of law. I think it's one of the best places in the world. And over the last few years, it's developed a unique identity. As Communist China has tried to impose authoritarianism on the city, Hong Kong people have risen up almost in complete unity and redefined themselves as democrats and freedom lovers. And they're thinking of themselves as Hong Kong people first. It's been amazing to watch. I imagine a city of about 8 million people, pretty much the same as New York. Well, literally 2 million of them physically attended a democracy protest last year. That's amazing. I think they really are the most pro-democracy interested place in the world, certainly more than here in Canada. I think maybe even more than in America. In fact, the protesters often waved American flags, I think even more heartfelt, if that's possible, than many Americans do. It was quite something, and I'm so proud that we sent 2 reporters, first Avi Yamini, and then a follow-up trip with Kian Bexty. My favorite moment, of course, was when Avi met this guy.
Donald Trump, don't trust China. China is asshole.
That clip has been seen tens of millions of times in so many different platforms. Just great stuff. Anyways, 2019 was the year of victory for Hong Kong Democrats over Beijing tyrants. There were city elections late last year that were seen as a proxy battle over so much more than just who would be the local politicians in charge of things like garbage pickup and pet bylaws. It was really a referendum on China itself. And that municipal vote went overwhelmingly towards the freedom side of things. It was just amazing. Well, 2020 couldn't be more different from 2019, I regret. It's been terrible, I should say. I mean, one silver lining is that the world, which generally ignored Hong Kong last year, I mean, seriously, I think for a while there, we were the only Canadian journalists who had a camera in Hong Kong. Well, now the whole world has a proper measure of China and what it's really like as a dictatorship, what it's like towards its own citizens and towards us in the West, who are the real good guys and bad guys over there. I think we've seen it. It's been a painful year, but like 9/11, it was a year of clarifying, a painful wake-up call, but maybe we needed a calamity of that gravity to wake some people up to the direness of the problem of China. In the past, I've shown you this international survey by Pew Research, asking people in different countries what they think of China. Now, this chart is over a year out of date now. Canadians have been angry at China for more than a year, ever since China kidnapped and held hostage 2 Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. Say, did you know that today marks the 500th day of their captivity? 500 days, longer than Iran held the U.S. hostages. A scandal that was one reason Jimmy Carter lost the 1980 election. 500 days. And I bet that Justin Trudeau will make a public statement marking Earth Day, Lenin's birthday, but not the hostage situation. It'll be fascinating to see those international opinions and numbers now on China. If Pew Research does their survey again, I hope they do. The Chinese government is in full PR spin mode now around the world. They infected the world because they lied to the world. And now they're selling the world medical gear after hoovering up all the medical gear from the world. Oh, and they're making a big show out of giving foreign aid in the form of medical gear, which often turns out to be faulty, to be useless. Hey, at least they're shipping faulty equipment to Europe at all. They're not even shipping anything to Canada. Did you see this outrageous and unbelievable story yesterday? Canada sent 2 planes to China to pick up deliveries of medical gear, and according to Trudeau and his henchmen, Chinese authorities sent the planes home empty. I'm not kidding. And get a load of this excuse that Liberal cabinet ministers, here's Ahmed Hassan, are using.
Canada sent 2 planes to get equipment from China, and they came home empty-handed. Like, how does that happen? How do we send a plane to China and then they say, sorry, that the supplies are gone? Can you explain how that happens?
No, it wasn't a question of the supplies being gone, Evan. The Prime Minister addressed this question in his press conference, and he indicated that the problem is that, China has strict requirements on how long planes can be on the ground in the airport. So after a short period of time, our planes had to take off because the supplies were taking a long time to get to the airport. But we will continue to follow up on those orders. We are continuing to deliver orders to provinces.
Yeah. Do you think that's really what happened? Our plane was parked in a loading zone, didn't put enough quarters in the parking meter, so they only had 15 minutes before they had to move or they'd get a ticket or something? Yeah. So apparently we had to leave without medical gear, but it's all good. Yeah, no problem. We just sent a cargo jet 14 hours to China to be told to turn around and fly home 14 hours empty. And apparently that happened twice. And yeah, it's cool, no biggie. Do you actually believe that excuse? That there was an issue with how long the plane was parked? Do you believe that? Yeah, no, me neither. But then again, these are the Liberals who think that the nickname Little Potato is a deep compliment from China. They really like us, guys.
We're quite proud. The Prime Minister has been given a fond nickname in China. He is called Tudou, which I believe means potato. And I can't say the Chinese word, it's Xian Tudou, little potato, because his father, Pierre Elliott Tudou, was senior potato. So we feel we are off to a great start.
So yeah, I'd like to see those Pew numbers again on world opinion about China. And for Africans to have a say too. China has pretty much colonized Africa. And believe it or not, China, the land of cheap labor, it brings in cheap labor itself now from Africa to China. But now the official Chinese line is that the Wuhan virus was caused by Africans. It's an African thing. They're to blame. So anyone black is being kicked out of apartments in China, banned from restaurants and malls, even rounded up on the streets by police. Take a look at this.
Yeah, if you come from Africa country, you can't go in our building.
Why? But I live in China for 20 years, and I have already get my test and everything. Why can't I stay China 20 years? Was I to
Or take a look at this.
Well, I can go in. Yeah. I can go in. They cannot. Come on. They can. Right? Okay. Oh my God, this is ridiculous. I'm sorry, I cannot help you. Really. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm thinking Africa doesn't like the new apartheid. Here's a Chinese factory in Nigeria, apparently burned to the ground in retaliation by Nigerians against China. I mean, hate to say it, communist China can be just as bigoted as South Africa. Check out this popular Chinese TV ad. Hey, I wonder if all those NBA basketball players who were making pro-China comments last year during the Hong Kong protests to appease their business interests in China, to keep their endorsements for brands in China, I wonder what they think of all this anti-black racism. I wonder if they themselves will be allowed back in China despite their skin color. Yeah, I think the NBA made a really bad bet on a really bad country, but then again, so did every tech company, every industrial manufacturer, Hollywood. Anyone who looked at China and saw only 1.5 billion customers, not 1.4 billion prisoners. So forgive me all this throat clearing. It's just a long way of saying it's been an awful year, 2020. But it's been a revealing year. Today is an awful day, the 500th day of captivity for the two Michaels. But let me tell you something I saw as I scanned my favorite alternative news sources about China. I mean, you obviously can't trust a word that Chinese official media say, although I read a lot of Chinese official media because I think I can work backwards to see what they're trying to accomplish with their spin. Here's a tweet boasting about their naval exercises, a rebuke to the United States that recently had a virus outbreak on an aircraft carrier, and it's a threat to Taiwan and other democracies. As Gordon Chang told us yesterday, China's getting more aggressive, not less aggressive. And look at this, by way of example. I showed you all the peaceful democracy protests in Hong Kong last year, very peaceful, culminating in democratic wins in local elections. Yeah, so what? As Stalin said, how many tank divisions does the Pope have? So, you know, you can vote, so what? As Mao said, power comes out of the barrel of a gun. So Chinese police just plain old arrested en masse the democracy leaders last week, including very senior pro-democracy politicians, and the West barely noticed. So focused are we on the Chinese virus. And even Hong Kong people, well, what luck for China that 2 million Hong Kong people can't jam the streets in protest anymore because of that same Chinese virus. Funny how it works out that way. So I saw this. Just in, China seeks new world media order, says Watchdog, as Hong Kong plunges to 80th in Press Freedom Index. And I believe it. Hong Kong has a rollicking free press, but it is very much under attack. Communist thugs literally broke in and damaged the printing presses of democracy-oriented newspapers, trashed the place. There they are going after the Epoch Times. They've arrested people, as we've just mentioned. Here, I'll click on the study they refer to, though. China seeks new world media order, says Watchdog, as Hong Kong plunges to 80th in press freedom. I'm going to read a bit. This is from the Hong Kong Free Press. Hong Kong has plunged 7 places in the 2020 World Press Freedom Index, quote, because of its treatment of journalists during pro-democracy demonstrations, Reporters Without Borders, RSF, says. China, meanwhile, was ranked 177th as it sought a new world media order, according to the French journalism watchdog. Hong Kong was ranked 73rd in 2019. Its new ranking marks a significant drop from 18th, where the city stood when the index was created in 2002. The Press Freedom Rating is released annually to highlight the media freedom situation in 180 countries and regions and measures pluralism, the independence of the media, quality of legislative frameworks, and the safety of journalists, unquote. Now, far be it from me to object, but I know for a fact that our very scrappy reporters, Avi Amini and Keem Bexley, were unbothered by police as they covered the protests. It's just a fact. They weren't bothered at all. And I don't want to be dramatic, but on any given day here in Canada, our reporter David Menzies is hassled more by police than Keen and Avi were in Hong Kong, including when David was thrown to the ground for peacefully asking some polite questions of Don Cherry's Judas, a man named Ron McLean. So I don't want to take anything away from what has happened in Hong Kong in the last 6 months. China itself has zero press freedom, and if they could, they'd have it that way in Hong Kong itself. And maybe things have gotten much worse since Avi and Keen were there a few months ago. And the arrests suggest they might, but I think there might be a little bit of drama in this Reporters Without Borders report on purpose, and that's okay. So here's the Reporters Without Borders rankings for Hong Kong. I'm going to read a big chunk. This is actually now from that think tank that was quoted in the Hong Kong Free Press. So this is Reporters Without Borders. They say, Hong Kong saw many cases of violence against the media, mainly by the police and pro-Beijing criminal gangs, during the pro-democracy demonstrations in the summer and autumn of 2019. The territory is supposed to enjoy separate status as a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China until 2047, but press freedom is already in retreat as a result of pressure from Beijing. The most notable recent incident was the expulsion of Financial Times Asia editor Victor Mallet in October 2018. As vice president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Hong Kong, Mallet had chaired an event that wasn't to Beijing's liking. The Chinese Communist Party liaison office in Hong Kong controls, partly or entirely, several media outlets in the territory, including 2 daily newspapers, Tao Kung Pao and Wen Wei Po. Nonetheless, there is resistance. It is being led by a handful of independent online media, such as Stand News, Citizen News, The Initium, Hong Kong Free Press, and In Media. Okay, so it's getting bad, and there was real violence. There was an expulsion of a foreign journalist. I'm frankly not sure if Avi or Keem would be allowed back in Hong Kong today. I don't know. But there still is a free press there. And along the bottom of that page on Reporters with Borders, you can see there have been no journalists killed in Hong Kong. believe it or not, that's a measure they use. It suggests that they need that measure in some countries. To be honest, I think this report is more a warning of what is to come rather than what is happening right now. I just don't believe that it's worse to be a journalist in Hong Kong than many of the 79 countries they put higher than Hong Kong on the rankings. I mean, East Timor, Malawi, just to pick a couple. I just don't believe that Japan is at number 66 that low. Japan is great, it's free, it's liberal, it's safe. Let me just tell you what they wrote about Japan. Not connected to Hong Kong, let me just show you. They say, the world's third biggest economic power, Japan, is a parliamentary monarchy that, in general, respects the principles of media pluralism, but journalists find it hard put to fully play their role as democracy's watchdog because of the influence of tradition and business interests. Journalists have been complaining of a climate of mistrust towards them ever since Shinzo Abe became prime minister again in 2012. Yeah, sorry, that's got nothing to do with press freedom. Don't tell me they're number 66 in the world. It's Japan, it's free. I mean, people don't trust journalists. That's nothing to do with press freedom. And the United States of America, with its amazing First Amendment, ranked 45. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. Let me read some about America. Press freedom in the United States continued to suffer during President Donald Trump's third year in office. Arrests, physical assaults, public denigration, and the harassment of journalists continued in 2019, though the numbers of journalists arrested and assaulted were slightly lower than the year prior. Much of that ire has come from President Trump and his associates in the federal government who have demonstrated the United States is no longer a champion of press freedom at home or abroad. This dangerous anti-press sentiment has trickled down to local government institutions and the American public. In March 2019, a leaked document revealed the U.S. government was using a secret database tracking journalists, activists, and others who border authorities believed should be stopped for questioning when crossing certain checkpoints along the U.S.-Mexico border. Is that all you got? Trump was denigrating some journalists on this Mexico thing. I looked up that border story, and it's true some journalists were pulled aside and asked some secondary questions before being allowed to go right through the border. I don't know, maybe I should be more concerned about that, but that happens to me, I'd say, once a month when I used to travel. I mean, you get pulled aside for some questions. Sometimes I don't understand the reasons, but after 10 wasted minutes, I'm on my way. I'm sorry, that and Donald Trump sparring with Jim Acosta from CNN day after day, that doesn't make America a bad place for freedom of the press. This is very partisan. If America were a bad place for the press, Jim Acosta would not be back in the White House briefing room every single day, delighting in the sparring matches as the president's foil. He's loving it, and when the White House took away his privilege to attend for one day, he sued and was immediately let back in. Trump chooses Acosta and other liberal haters almost every day because he likes to spar. I'm sorry, that doesn't make America a hater of free speech. This is a political survey. You know, compare Trump loving to spar with reporters to, say, me and Rebel News. Kian Bexte, David Menzies are reporters who are routinely denied access to Trudeau's briefings. We're denied access to his briefings every single day right now. In fact, today, we had a legal cross-examination on an affidavit in our continuing lawsuit against Trudeau over that very thing when they banned us from the debates. And yet Canada is ranked 16th on the press freedom list. Here, let me read their excuse. Canada illustrated its growing commitment to international press protections this year when it launched, alongside the United Kingdom, the Media Freedom Coalition in July 2019, creating an international alliance between nations that pledge to champion and defend press freedom. Oh my God, I know that conference. I was there. I was there with Sheila Gunn-Reid. That was the one where literally at the conference called Press Freedom, Media Freedom, Chrystia Freeland, our Deputy Prime Minister, then the Foreign Minister, tried to ban our reporter Sheila Gunn-Reid at a press freedom conference. Remember this?
Okay, so Global Mail, Global, CTV, Al Jazeera, CBC, and the National Become with me, please. And Neil.
What about the rest?
The rest of us?
The rest will have to see that.
No, I think we all go.
That's nonsense.
No, go.
That is nonsense.
Let's take us to the room and we can see if we can.
No, we're not going, Brittany. We're just not.
We're all going.
This is a media freedom conference.
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
We just don't do that.
Yeah, we're not going then.
So that fake Potemkin conference on free press is why Canada's doing so great, because they gave money to a conference. That's like that Joni Mitchell song. They took all the trees and put them in the tree museum. That's the only place Canada believes in free speech, at a conference about free speech. But they couldn't even keep up that pretense for the duration about the conference itself before kicking Sheila out. No mention of the corrosive effects of Trudeau bailing out 99% of the newspapers and thus controlling them with money. No mention of Stephen Guilbeault's plan to license websites.
What we are saying is that we will not ask news organizations to have license. And I refer people to the report, which does make an independent panel that makes a recommendation that on the issue of discoverability, media organization would need to have a license, but that we're not. And media can be confusing. I recognize that because the report talks about media, but not necessarily in the sense necessarily of news agencies, and maybe the confusion comes from there. Thank you very much.
And no mention of Dominique Lebon's brainwave to make it illegal to have the wrong opinions about the virus. That's what China did. And China is ranked 177 out of 180. Now I agree with that. North Korea is last, by the way. I agree with that. But look, it's hardwired right into the mandate letter that Trudeau sent Guilbeault, the heritage minister. Trudeau has commanded him to come up with a plan to censor social media companies, make them delete things the government doesn't like in 24 hours or face huge penalties. I tell you what, they don't do that in Hong Kong. Look, I'm sure Reporters Without Borders means well, and I'm glad they're standing up to China, one of the few international NGOs to do so, and they're standing up for Hong Kong. Again, I'm very glad. But when they say that Trump's insults to lippy CNN reporters is a reason why America isn't free, they lose credibility. They come across as just partisans who simply don't like Donald Trump. And when they give Canada a pass because of some fake media freedom conference, but ignore all of Trudeau's censorship plans, it hurts their credibility too. Ironically, giving China a bad report, it's not going to make a spot of difference. China doesn't care. I mean, these are the people who mowed down thousands of democracy protesters with tanks at Tiananmen Square, and they don't care. They just pretend it never even happened. But this kind of report by Reporters Without Borders is actually the kind of thing that Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland care about. They love to go to international cocktail parties and jet around to places like Davos and the UN. So if Reporters Without Borders mentioned any one of Canada's censorship plans that I've just mentioned above, I guarantee you there would be an emergency meeting in the Liberal government because they, for whatever reason, care more about the opinion of fancy foreign pundits than they do about Canadian civil rights. So if anyone from Reporters Without Borders is watching this, hey, thanks for sticking up for Hong Kong. I don't even mind the hyperbole. We need all the help we can get. But could you please say a word about Trudeau's plan to turn every Canadian reporter into one of only two species allowed, either a reporter that Trudeau pays or a reporter that Trudeau bans? Neither are good for the country, and Reporters Without Borders should say so and stop whitewashing Trudeau's authoritarian mean streak. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.